cover all this. OK. All right, so the way I structured the rest of the presentation is really to focus on 10 architectural principles, and that's really based on talking to a lot of developers, looking at applications, building applications, and that's kind of my top 10 of things that I wish I had known and other developers had known before they actually embarked on their journey of developing a Phonegap application. And so we'll start with this first one, because sometimes there is a little bit of euphoria when we tell people, hey, you don't have to do it native. You can build a web app, and then you package it as a native app. And a lot of people, when you tell them that, they think, great, because I've been building web apps for 15 years, so I know exactly how to do it. That's my skill set. And they start building a Phonegap application the way they have been building web apps for 15 years. And the way they have been building web apps for 15 years is usually like this. This is kind of a version of a sitemap. But the point is, behind this, each box is a page. And behind each page, you have a little piece of PHP, ASP, JSP, Ruby on Rails, or even Node.js. A little bit of script that's going to build the UI dynamically. Can you do that for a Phonegap application? Can you have the server just like this? Every time you want to go to a new view, you ask the server, hey, can you please generate that page, let's say in PHP, and then give me the view, and I will gladly display it on the phone. Can you do it? Absolutely. It's HTML. You can totally do it. Should you do it? No. All right. And so, that sounds really, and I call this like there is a lot of common sense in what I'm going to tell you today, but there are also some deeper tricks. But don't do this. OK? There are two major problems with this. The first one is that when you have a mobile device, you expect the application to somehow work when you are not connected to the network. In this case, obviously, you rely on a server to generate the UI. That's not going to work. And the second problem is about performance. People wait 3 seconds in a browser on their laptop. Unfortunately, we've been trained to accept that. If you're on a website and you click a link, you wait 3 seconds, that's fine. On a mobile device, the attention span of people is extremely limited. And if the application doesn't respond right away, your application is bad. So that is simply not acceptable. So, yeah, in the old world, this application that we are building would work like this, right? You have that list, and then, behind each list item, there would be a link, like I show you here, to another page, whether it's PHP or something else, it doesn't matter. And, you pass the ID, and the server would build the details view. And we'll look at that in a second, because you have a version of that. OK, so what is the new school? If that was the old school, the new school is to do it like this, where you have a single HTML page. Right? It's not like a bunch of little scriptlets all over the places. You have one HTML page, and it looks like this. Essentially, it's empty. Okay? You have an empty body. And that is what we call a single-page application. You obviously have some JavaScript in there. And the key principle is that as the user navigates through the app, you're going to, in JavaScript, create views dynamically, inject the view that the user required into the DOM, and then remove it when the user navigates away to another page. OK? So create a UI dynamically in JavaScript, inject, remove. Now, that sounds good, but it's very different, obviously, from what people have done in the past. And all of a sudden, you have to worry about things that you never really had to worry about. Like, for instance, what's the likelihood in the old world that you're going to have a memory leak, for instance, if you keep navigating to another page, right? Even if you wrote really bad code, that page is only going to be in the browser for a few seconds or a minute, and then, as soon as you go to another page, that, the DOM is flushed, it's gone. In this world, that same DOM, you never go away. You always work in that same DOM. You add stuff, you remove stuff, you inject another view, you remove it. If you write leaking code, you're going to know pretty fast, okay? Because you may be like for a full day in that same DOM, or for even more, okay? So all of a sudden, you're going to have to worry about really different things. So here is a kind of a summary of the differences. Single page application, obviously you have a single page. The UI is generated at the client side in JavaScript. You have obviously full offline support. That is another one that's important. If you let the browser simply load another page, you have absolutely no control over page transitions, right? You kind of, the browser is simply going to display the next one, and you cannot add a nice hardware-accelerated transition, for instance. This is fast. This is laggy. You never go to the server to get the next page. You build it, you show it immediately. And also the different assets in your application, whether it's libraries that you're using, jQuery, Backbone, whatever, or CSS. It's loaded once because, remember, there is only one page. Whereas in the other model, every time you go to another page, if it uses jQuery, of course, it can be cached, but still, it's not going to be optimal because you're going to make that request to load these assets every single time. So the first architectural principle for a successful Phonegap, performant, fast Phonegap application is to use that model of a single page application. So if you downloaded the repository or cloned the repository, please open that folder in your editor. I'm going to do it with you right here. Open folder, don't save, and it's going to be this one. So remember that repository that I showed you on GitHub? If you haven't done it yet, please do it now. And you will see that there is essentially one section, one part for each of these principles that we just discussed. So let's look at the first version of the application. Okay, so MPA for multi-page architecture. And you'll see a lot of applications built that way initially. And you can tell already, so I have index.html, which is going to show the list. And then when I want to show the products, I'll navigate to another page. So let's look at index.html first. You see that I have my navigation bar, like you just did it yourself. I have a search bar. And then I have my UL here. That's the list of items. Can you guys see that? A little bigger. OK. That is my list of items. And then I have some JavaScript here. And there is some nice stuff, though. Not everything is bad in that application. I'm getting the data from somewhere. You see that? Where am I getting my data from? I have some gifts for you for good answers, because I know that sometimes I need to stimulate you guys. Have a nice 32 gigabytes USB key. You can put it in your wallet or use it as a keychain. It's great. Where am I getting my data from? Just, From a product adapter. That's too easy. Nice try. from a product adapt. That was kind of, okay, I'm going to give it to you, but that's not enough.
You didn't show us you didn't show us where product adapter was defined.
Exactly. So, what's the right answer?
Magic. 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 REST API?
Maybe.
An object.
Ajax.
Maybe.
Web 2.0.
Maybe. So the right answer, since I say maybe all the time, the right answer is no.
Number 7.
Come on, guys. The right,
From your model.
the right answer is I don't know.
Right.
And that it's a good thing, right? Because if I did an Ajax call in here, and Ajax calls all over the places, and all of a sudden I decided that I wouldn't do RESTful services anymore, but maybe I use a local database on my device, then I have to go change everything. So that's another principle that we will discuss later. But the point is, okay, I get the data from somewhere, and then look at what I do. I loop, and I add an li for each product in the list, okay? But the funny thing here is that, look, in that li, when you click it, I'm going to href to product.html, which is another page, okay? So now, if I look at how this thing works, so I'm going to load this page here. Okay, here it is. So here is my list, okay? And look what's going to happen, okay? First of all, let's do it again. How was the transition? Okay, I select a product. Flash, right? Oh, I lose context. What happened? Now, this was fast. It can be slower. Now, you can tell that it's multi-page architecture because look at the URL. This is product.html, whereas the previous one, if I back out of there, I was on index.html, okay? So that's the MPA multi-page architecture version of this. So let's quickly move to the next version.
Are we missing from the platform page transition, basically?
Well, that's that's a good point. Yeah, it would be nice if you could tell the browser how to bring in that page, but right now you can't.
IE did this, didn't
Yeah,
it did.
They had page transition.
Oh wow. Okay.
This was like 1999 or something.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So that may change the game if indeed but. Yeah, I think there would still be a lot of benefits in using the single page, but that one would certainly go away.
So I was on the W3C's tag, like the techno architecture.
Yep.
So it pains me to hear you say like single page.
I know. Yeah, yeah.
But it's because it's broken.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, there's ways. I mean, this is the best way for us now.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm all for it, but I'm looking for like how do we fix this crap?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my first.
Controller play into this? No.
Kind of. So I was going to bring up navigation controller as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is hopefully the fix for
Yep.
cache manifest.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that'll give you the server you were talking about before. So you'll actually have the server you can bring in the bits that you need.
Yes, yes, yes.
And then load them in as you need to. But you can't do it with pages. You'll still have to just
Right, right.
fake etc. Sorry, I
Yeah.
don't mean to-
No, but that's interesting because that was my first reaction when I started building them like that. I'm like, I need that browser or that web view to be able to take a parameter so that I can tell how to bring that page in.
I
But
will start a holy war for page transitions.
that's right.
Well, there's also just like, I guess out of interest maybe morbid curiosity. There are forks of Phonegap that allow for multi-web views, so you can facilitate this type of thing, but then you end up with some manifesty JSON business that has to define which pages go in what order and how the transitions behave with each other. So.
And then you get into another problem, I think, which is, okay, how do you maintain the context of your app? If every view is a different page, now it's stateless, and so you need. I mean, there are ways, obviously, to maintain the states, but that becomes another problem.
I just think the pendulum is always swinging in one
Yeah,
direction
yeah.
or the other, right?
Yeah.
does it make sense to try to have it hybrid somehow? At least on web applications, I believe sometimes having an hybrid SPA, I mean,
Yes.
not all
It's
not
not
only
always.
the same.
Right.
right?
And I think that's a very good point. We shouldn't be religious about this. Like, for instance, a lot of people use a hybrid model that you mentioned when they have a page, for instance, the content changes a lot, and it's just content. And they will bring it from the server so that they can actually go update it on their server without having to redeploy through the App Store. So some people do that as a workaround because if they change their contact information, they don't want to have to redeploy to the App Store for that. So they will kind of do a hybrid. That's going to be like a static page that's not part of the SPA. So I think that's a really, really good point. I think that should really be your default thinking is to do single page, but that doesn't mean that you can break that rule. All right, so let's take a quick look at the single page version of that, and this is going to be a first attempt. Obviously, it's not going to be pretty right now, but look the difference here. So if you look at part 2 SPA, so that's how you know that you have a single page application. You basically have an empty body. You may have some scripts that you load, a few libraries, and your main application here, your main application file. But in terms of markup, the body is completely empty. And so all the views are actually created dynamically using JavaScript. So here is how we do it in this version of the application. So we have different functions. You see that here I have render list, render home view, render product view. And look at what I'm doing. Exactly. Thank you. So this is the beauty of single page applications, right? As I said, you will have to create all your views dynamically using JavaScript. Don't leave the room right now, and don't.
Why can't you XHR those in? It's your local anyway.
Well, it will do something like that in a second. So that's going to be in part 3. We'll do a lot better than that, and it's going to be somewhat XHR, something like that. But this is a progression. This is to show you that if at the basic level, this is a single page application. Now, the other interesting thing, because before we look at the specifics, look at so if I go to my browser now, getting lost in my okay. So let me open this. Okay, so in this version, you see, look at the URL. So it's index.html. I select one. It is still index.html, right? And it's going to be index.html throughout the entire application. But somehow I need a flag to know what state I should render. And there are essentially 2 ways to indicate that. This is kind of the old way, which is using a hashtag. Because you can change the hashtag as much as you want, the web view is not going to reload the page. So this is a nice little hack to basically use whatever is after the hashtag as your own convention to kind of know which state, in other words, which view in your single page application you need to render. Okay? There is now a standard for that, which is push state, but it's not yet consistently implemented by all the different browsers and versions of the web view. That's why you still see a lot of this out there. Okay? So now, how do you handle that thing? You need some kind of a routing mechanism. So let me show you my poor man approach to that. So I have here, I'm watching, you see what I'm doing here? I'm actually watching changes to the hashtag. So I register a a handler to say, hey, call route whenever the hash changes. And in route, obviously, this is a very simplistic and borderline ugly implementation of route. I'm using regular expressions and say, hey, if the, whatever is after the hash looks like this, so essentially products with some number behind it, then I'm going to display the product view. So I'm calling render product view. If there is no hash, then I know that I need to render the home view. And of course, in a real application, you'd have a lot more options. But basically, this is the basic principle. You watch changes to the hash, and then you have some kind of routing mechanism to decide which view you render. Okay? And in this case, it's implemented in a pretty ugly way by concatenating, as you see here, HTML with your data, with your model. Okay? So that's pretty bad, right? What's bad about this?
We've all done it.
We've all done it, right? And some of us may even still do it secretly. But obviously, it's bad enough to write it, but then to go maintain it, to, if a tag is not, if there is a typo in your tag, good luck to find it, because your tool is not going to be able to help you. If you have the luxury to work with designers that actually built the HTML for you, you're not going to ask your designers to go write this, right? They're going to, they can give you plain vanilla HTML, but they are not concatenated for you, so you're going to have to do it yourself. I mean, it's terrible, okay? But we're going to fix that. We're going to fix that actually right now, and then we're going to take a break. Well, actually, it's 2:58, so I think
I was just upstairs and there's no coffee nor break there. So
oh, there is.
Take some more minutes. Maybe they'll just setting it up.
Okay, all right. So we can continue then. All right. All right. So I'm good here. Okay. So we did that, and now. Oh gosh. Okay, you know what? Okay, and now we end up with something like this. Okay, and as we just identified, it's really terrible. So what is the solution to this problem? Templates. All right. So with templates, we go back to pure HTML. In fact, it's kind of funny because I don't know if any of you are old enough. How many people did like CGI development like probably 20 years ago? It was like the first SEEP or 15 or 17. We're getting there. We're getting there. It was very much looking like this, except that instead of JavaScript, it was C or C++, but basically you were creating web pages by concatenating, HTML with C++. And the solution to that was what? People said, hey, that's insane. Every time that person in marketing says, hey, you need to change a comma there, you needed to go change your C code. Insane, right? So what did people do? Perl. But then PHP, Cold Fusion, like templating solutions, right? And essentially, that was the JSPs. That was the exact same. You say, okay, we're not going to do servlets anymore. Java, concatenating HTML in Java. We're going to write HTMLs with placeholders. A JSP, an ASP, a PHP page, that's all the same idea. Well, guess what? We are going through exactly the same steps, but in this case at the client side. Okay? So this is back to plain HTML, but we know that at some point we'll have to go, put some values in there, so we'll put some placeholders. Now, there are many options out there in terms of which templating engine you use. Mustache.js, Handlebars.js, underscore JS. If you're using Backbone, it has templates built in and many others, okay? Doesn't really matter, and you'll see that the exact syntax for placeholders may be different. It doesn't really matter which one you use as long as you're using one, because as we'll see in 1 second, the code is going to look a lot better. The one thing that does matter, though, is performance. To me, that's the only criteria that I'm looking at when I'm evaluating these different templating engines, because you don't want something that slows down everything. So you can do your own tests and research. Personally, I tend to use handlebars JS, or if I do pure Backbone, I will use underscore. You'll see that some of them have different opinions on how declarative they should be versus letting you add some code in the templates. So typically, Mustache says no logic at all. It's all model. So you're never going to see a piece of code in a Mustache template, okay? So all you're going to see is stuff like this. So if you want to have logic, you're going to have to add a layer to your architecture, typically something that people call the view model. So you kind of prepare a model that has everything the view needs, right? Whereas if your templating solution like underscore, for instance, lets you write some basic code. I'm not talking about real logic, but say you need to format some, like a date or currency. Say, I'm not going to add another layer to my, I'm just going to write that one JavaScript, one liner of JavaScript to format, that currency. If you're okay with that, I'm okay with it too. But just to let you know that I think that's the major difference, how strictly declarative the templating engine wants to be. And obviously, the other one that I mentioned before is how fast they are. There are a bunch of benchmarks that you'll find online comparing the different options there. But the key point is, and that's my rule number 2, is to actually use a template. So let's take a look at part 3 and see how the code of the application evolved. Now, when you write templates, one key problem is going to be where to write them and where to load them from. So again, we're going from bad to good here. So this is not the best practice, okay? But that's definitely the easiest way to quickly hack it. See what I'm doing? Where are my templates here? They are in index.html, and they are in script blocks. Okay, they are of type template. It's not horrible, except if you have like 200 of them. Yeah. And if you have to ask again your design guy to go stuff these templates there. But one way people do this is by actually inserting these scripts as part of the build process. So that's one way you can do it too. So in other words, you maintain all these templates as separate files, and then you have a build process that's going to inject that in index.html. So that is one way you can do that. But we will cover different options there. I don't know why, because initially I was expecting that I would simply be able to do like you do for a traditional script file, that you would be able to say src equals and then point to a .html file. But for some reason, that doesn't work. So you basically have two options. Either you inline them like this, or you're going to have to build your own template loader, which I did, and I'll show you one implementation of that. Or you can use solutions like required.js, and we'll speak about that a little later today. Okay? But so that's the basic idea. So let's look at one template in particular. Like, for instance, I think the one that's interesting is like the product template, because it's a non-trivial page. So you see that it's product dash TPL, and you have all your markup. This is just standard HTML, but once in a while you need to merge, model data here, and you use the double curly syntax to say, yeah, okay, this is a placeholder to later on, display the price right in here, okay? So that's how you write all your templates. At least that's one option for doing it. So now, how do you work with templates in your code? And again, this is just an example of that. So the first thing you'll have to do is to actually compile these templates. By compiling, I mean the process means that you're basically creating a function from that basic text, from that basic HTML. You're creating a function that takes an object, a kind of a data object, as a parameter, and that object is essentially what's going to be merged in that template. So for that price thing to work, the one that I showed you before, the object that you pass in obviously needs to have a price attribute. So first step, you compile your templates, and then it becomes super, super easy. Look at that. This used to be super ugly. I had like 100 lines of concatenated HTML and JavaScript, and now it became a one-liner where you use the compiled template. I told you it's a function, and you just pass the object. Okay? So one-liner, the object is getting merged into that template. Okay? So that makes the code a lot cleaner. We have some news about the break?
There's a break.
There is a break. So before we go to break, you need to deserve it. And you need to be, again, extremely critical. I mean, I think compared to the previous version, which was really ugly with the concatenated stuff, what's still pretty bad in what you see on the screen here? It works, it's nice, it's cleaner, but come on, be critical.
It's still not a complete application. For example, we have one template for read-only for a couple of stuff, and then you have the not read-only version. So we have to switch all the time if you want such kind of application. Put them all here.
Yeah, so I think that's the bad part, is that I have that one app.js with render list, render home view, render product view. Now, imagine a large application. Everything is kind of, it doesn't feel very partitioned. It feels like a big bag of everything, right? And it would be a lot better to have kind of self-contained objects that are responsible for one thing. Like, for instance, render a product view, that would be one object. Render the home view, that would be another object. That's how you have been doing it in all the other languages that you have been using. Kind of build self-contained components that different people can work on, that are reusable and stuff like that. So in the next section, we'll see how to do that. Okay? So we'll take maybe 15 minutes. That work? So